Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to BPCG Gardeners Question Time for the 25th of April in our new afternoon slot, a new prime time division for us. We've got some really nice stuff to share with you guys this afternoon. So we will just dive right in, I think. I'm going to start us off with a 15-minute video that Kate has made, a really kind of comprehensive walk around of BPCG that she made yesterday evening. Yeah, it's a glorious afternoon, early evening in the sunshine, and it really shows off everything that's happening at BPCG while we can't be there in person. So I'm just going to dive right in for that. So. Okay, you will have to let me know if if the sound doesn't play, but we should be ready to just go.
I thought it would be nice just to have a little walk along the woodland bank, just looking so pretty as all the ferns are just beginning to unfurl. I don't know what the light is like here, so if it's bad, I apologise.
Very good, very good.
You can see some of this amazing new red foliage coming up from some of the different ferns. It's really been such a success. Kat did such a lovely job with volunteers terracing this and planting out all these glorious ferns. It's really good spot for the ferns. We keep it wet enough with the leaky hose. Just seems to be flourishing, which is just really lovely. Sorry for overusing the word lovely. And then here in the fourth bed, we've got the Solanaceae, that's the potatoes, potatoes and tomatoes, and there are other members of that family as well, such as deadly nightshade. So you can see the 4-crop rotation that we're practicing in these 4 beds. So I'm in the lower garden now and looking at the Udolph border, and you can see this is a warm weather, everything's coming in so quickly. And whilst it's not in its full glory yet, you can see just how much promise there is. Similarly, we've got the dye garden as well. Everything's coming up. See the irises at the back there. Amazing, the wallflowers have just gone on flowering as well. So that's all lovely. Few wood pigeons enjoying a little trek around our meadow. I hope they're not doing too much damage. And then moving on, we've got pretty immaculately weeded onions and garlics here with the leaky hose visible. And then the broad beans here, which are a bit younger than some of the other broad beans. So this is our legumes bed. Broad beans here, and then various edible peas coming up pretty nicely here too. And then in the bed beyond, which I'll just walk to in the yellow bed here, we've got the brassicas. We've got massive pak choi grown by Chen Mei, which is under this EnviroMesh frame, which is designed to keep the cabbage white and other winged predators out. And then we've got your other cabbages and other brassicas further down the bed. So I'm in the lower garden now and looking at the Udolph border. And you can see, just because of the warm weather, everything's coming on so quickly. And whilst it's not in its full glory yet, you can see just how much promise there is. Similarly, we've got the dye garden as well. Everything's coming up. See the irises at the back there. Amazing, the wallflowers have just gone on flowering as well. So that's all lovely. Early everything is, you can see on this elderflower that the first elderflowers are coming out. So we're going to have to start picking those through making cordial. So I don't know if my microphone's good enough to pick up the sound of the buzzing, but it's incredibly audible to me. And you can see all these bees here feeding on the comfrey, which is just lovely. They've been guzzling away all day. You know, maybe some of these are honeybees. I'm afraid I am not sufficiently qualified, but David could comment on it. And maybe these honeybees will be going back to the hives. I can see that's a different type of bee. So I'll leave that to the experts though. So this is in the this is in the herb garden. It's looking absolutely beautiful, as always. It shows that Verena's been doing a fair amount of work here on the day she's come. And she's planted a whole load of seeds, which will hopefully mature into plants that will fill in some of these gaps here. This is the dye garden, the other dye garden here, which is also looking pretty lovely. Diane, if you're watching this, you can give us some instructions on anything you'd like doing. You can see just here that the mahonias set fruit. Very confident squirrel just there, totally unbothered by me. Clearly got very used to life without many people around. Here's the kitchen garden bed. She's obviously been fairly, well, the nematode treatment, which we've tried to protect the little young lettuces, hasn't been 100% successful. As you can see, quite a few of them have been munched here, which is bloody irritating. Interestingly, they don't seem to be so keen on the red leafed, and certainly on the chicory. So maybe it's because it's that much more bitter. They don't seem to go for it, they being the slugs and the snails. Just showing you a little bit of the orchard, which is looking really beautiful. Got more fantastic fruit bushes, loganberry here, trained along the fence. And then autumn raspberries as well. And then something which is kind of fascinating to me is the walnut. I don't know if you can see, but here's the walnut flower, which is just so not what you would expect, really, when you think of what a walnut looks like. So here's the pigeons again. He's got something in his, yeah, had something in its beak, presumably for nest building. And just here, not very beautiful, but nevertheless very exciting. This is the trench that various STAR volunteers have dug to enable the electricity conduit, which you can see there, to go down to the lower greenhouse. Which is soon to be electrified. David, how old are the boysenberries along this fence here?
We planted the first one about 3 and a bit years ago, and the subsequent ones, we've got 4 here now. They are taken from cuttings or from the fact that they layer long. So it's taken the first couple of years really They were very feeble because the ground here is very poor. But with a bit of feeding, a bit of compost and watering, I think they've come up very nicely. It's taken really 4 to 5 years to get them into this state. And I think, I must say, that this year, these blossoms are the best we ever had.
So it's pretty peaceful still up here. Squirrels, you know, up in the sycamores, having a nice time as usual. And just showing you really the upper 8 crop here. You can see we've got loads more mature broad beans here, which are going to be, well, the flowers are going to become beans very, very soon, it looks like here. That's lovely. Brassica bed in the middle of being planted out under the mesh as well. Then you've got your onions and garlic here. This bed's not yet planted. And then got all your little seedlings coming up here. This is spinach all along this bed. And then in here, we've got other young, I think, is this beetroot? Chard. Beetroot in this bed here. So it's a bit of a problem that we have got quite a lot of weeds coming through as well, but we'll get going on that soon. And then this is our stock bed here. And a whole load of planting's gone on in this bed as well. And then the rhubarb. Yeah.
He was walking, all in a shower of rain. She sheltered in a green bush, her beauty to save, and with her apron thrown over her, he mistook her for a swan, and he shot her and killed her by the setting of the sun. Home ran young Jimmy with his dog and his gun, saying, "Uncle, dear uncle, have you heard what I've done? I met my own true love. I mistook her for a swan, and I shot her and I killed her by the setting of the sun." Up spoke old uncle with his locks hanging grey, saying, "Jimmy, dearest Jimmy, don't you run away. Don't leave your own country till the trial does come on, for they never will hang you for the shooting of a swan." All the waves we're changing, all the ways we are. Seems like we're always waiting, and then we go to the dawn too. All I wanna do is stop, sitting at the bar with an old star, slowing it down till we're all in. We're only safe in the open. And where you gonna go when the lights change? Where you gonna go when it's too late? Who will tell you how you should behave now that you know that it's over? Where you gonna go when the lights change? Where you gonna go when it's too late? Who will tell you how you
Right, the eagle-eyed among you will probably have noticed that those last couple of clips were not from yesterday evening. I think that was from the end of probably the end of summer last year. I think that's Lucy Farrell playing guitar and singing. Those clips were in the big bucket of clips that that Kate sent me last night, and I thought that since that a lot of the purpose of BPCG is also, it's not just a greenhouse and a garden, it's a community space, and we do have
Yes, I thought it was a really interesting clip, Josh, and what it does show is how much we've improved the staging on that side.
Yes, it does. Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly the right thing to focus on, Chris. I just thought it would be nice, just as a reminder of all the other things that BPC does that we, are currently not available to us, but soon hopefully will be again. Right. David has got a feature to share with us, but before we get onto that, I think we're going to do some questions because we have a couple, and seeing it is BPCG Gardeners question time, it would be remiss of us if we forget to do those. The first question I have is from Joe Hibbs. The question is, why are my pepper seeds not germinating? I actually had to edit that quite significantly to take out a few choice adjectives. So I think Joe at least thinks that those pepper seeds are well overdue for germination. I suspect
what seeds? Sorry.
So they're peppers. I suspect he means chili peppers as opposed to bell peppers. And I suspect that there's plenty of people who are participating in this meeting who grow peppers almost every year. I certainly do. So I will give my expert opinion, and then the other two experts on the panel can
Josh,
jump in.
Josh, traditionally Doug is our chili expert.
Oh, really? Okay,
yeah.
Right. Well, Doug, I'm going to take you off mute whether you like it or not.
Okay.
And well, you need.
Well, the question begs further questions. I mean, what heat have they been in?
Yes.
How did you bury them? Was it old stale compost? I mean, there's all sorts of things that matter with chilies, but most important is keeping them hot, but not letting them get too wet and too hot, because that just cooks a seed. Chili seeds just disintegrate for some reason. So, in fact, without boasting, all mine have come up en masse this year for the first time. So chilies can be a hit and miss, I think. But unless we have some detail, do you know how long ago he planted them?
No, I'm afraid I don't have. Probably at least a couple of weeks, I think. I actually know the guy in question, and he's not the sort of person that would stick them in the soil and then be champing at the bit 48 hours later. But
they
yeah,
they need to have balanced temperature all the time they're germinating. It can't vary. It can't go up, it can't go down. It's quite difficult to do that sometimes in a greenhouse, because my greenhouse can go up to 80, 90 degrees very rapidly. So I keep my chilies well shaded, but you've got to keep them at a constant temperature really, and not let them get cold at night.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why they're kind of a crop that a lot of people can grow indoors quite successfully is that you do have that consistency of temperature in your own house. But yeah, light, heat, moisture, and patience, really, they're the four things.
Yeah.
So having made a lot of mistakes in this area myself, there's a couple of things that I could point out. The first is that if you plant them in too deep of a pot with too much of a lip, and the compost, if you plant them in the pot that you plan to grow them as an indoor plant in later on, which might be quite a nice pot, you might find that the soil is not getting anywhere near as much light as you think it is, because there's quite a significant lip between the edge of the pot and where the compost is. If they are kept at a nice consistent warm temperature, the soil can dry out quite quickly, and they do need to be moist. I also think it depends how long they've been in the packet for, or how old the packet
That's
is.
true. That's very true.
Yeah, so in the past I've had a lot of, this isn't going to help you, Joe, I'm afraid, but if you are you've got, it's the end of April, so you've got pretty much the last gasp chance to plant chili seeds if you were planning on it this year. Soaking them in chamomile tea is the thing that I found the most success with. Make a cup of chamomile tea, and then drink the tea first of all, and then use the same bag that you just made that cup of tea with to make another one, so sort of a weaker solution, and soak the seeds in them for a little bit, because the chamomile is supposed to strip off a little bit more of the shell barrier, but soaking the seeds should hopefully lead to higher germination rates. Are they things where you would consider vernalizing them as well, where you'd stick them in the fridge for 48 hours maybe? No, Chris is shaking his head. All right. Ignore me, folks.
They literally, I've seen lots of film where they grow in Mexico and literally the seeds just settle on sand and they still manage to grow. This is one of the things I find odd, and yet the more attention you give something in a greenhouse or something like that, you know, it's a fun. Growing's still a bit of a mystery to me.
Okay, well, I mean, yes, Joe, light, heat, moisture, patience. Hopefully they'll come up soon. But yeah, if you're watching this either live or you're watching the recording on the BPCG website, you haven't got long left to get them in the soil. Basically, if you've got some chili seeds that you were thinking of planting up even indoors, get them in there. Well,
look,
now.
I'll tell you what. If you don't, I've got quite a lot of spares. If we can arrange, I could drop some off at the greenhouse and you could pick them up.
I mean, now it does seem like you're bragging, Doug, but
yeah, well, this is the first time I've ever been able to say that. Anyway, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. David, would you say that you are ready to do your feature? I'm going to take you off mute and ask that question again.
Yeah, whenever. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, okay. So should we do that? And then we'll have some more questions when we get back. So over to you, David.
Okay. Have you got my screen now?
No, we have not. Yeah, you're going to have to share it from your end.
Let me just do that. Got it almost there. So, okay. Should be there now. Share screen. Just bear with. Share.
There we go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about what you see on the screen. There's my cacti from. I was thinking, since we're all at home, certainly I have had time to contemplate my neglected houseplants, and I thought maybe it's a good idea to do something that is particular interest to people who maybe don't have gardens. So I'm going to do a quick talk about what you see on the screen at the moment, which is Phalaenopsis orchids, which you can buy very cheaply at any florist or supermarket, and they well, at least when I seem to inherit a lot of Phalaenopsis that have bloomed and haven't and are in a bit of a sorry state, and so I thought I'd talk about their care. As you can see, they come in. I guess most people have seen them in Sainsbury's, and they're always in flower. And you take them home, and hopefully the flowers last quite a long time. So first thing, when you with Phalaenopsis orchids, you when you choose to buy a plant, you should look for the leaves, the health of the plant, rather than the flowers. It's more important. And so you want to look for leaves that are not blemished and are quite green, and particularly look for the center of the plant to make sure it's not rotting. And also, if you can get the chance, they usually, quite often these plants are in transparent pots and in a ceramic pot, and you should pull it out and see whether look for the health of the roots. And the roots should be green or white and kind of silvery colored. If they're brown or black and rotten, then leave the plant alone, and then you can pop it back. They're in transparent pots, by the way, because the roots like to get some. They like to get light, although it's not essential. And if you look at the roots there, there's some white ones that haven't really had much light, and then there's the green ones that have, and they're, because the plant will photosynthesize the roots as well as the leaves, and it's just advantageous but not necessary to the plant. As you see, if you grow the plant, if you see the plant in the shop, it may well have roots sticking out all over the place. That's not a problem. These are aerial roots, and it enables the plant, because it's an epiphyte, in its native state, it would be growing probably in the tree and trying to extract as much water it can from the humidity of the air. Don't cut them off because it's natural, and also it's your backup roots. Should the roots in the pot or root rot away, you can always plant it up again using these roots. Now, when you get it home, you should care. Where should you put it? It's quite, to get it to be happy, you need to find a place that's got good light, not in direct sunshine. They like bright shade, and they do, but they don't like cold drafts or to be any extremes of temperature. So over an active radiator is not such a good idea. You need to keep them watered. The leaves and roots can stand drying out, but the flowers can't. When you water them, you do wait for the growing medium to go dry, but not for any great length of time, because if it does dry out, it might decide to just that leaves and roots are more important than flowers, and drop the flowers. And conversely, if it's sitting in water, the roots are sitting in water, then that starves the plant of oxygen, and it might likewise be stressed. And also, I've read that you shouldn't put your Phalaenopsis orchid next to your bowl of fruit, because the ethylene gas that fruit,
Bananas.
excuse me, that fruit gives off is likely to signal to the plant that is likely to increase the metabolism of the flowers, and apparently they don't last as long. So
it's usually bananas that give that off.
yeah. So
very strongly.
Exactly. So and if you follow those rules, you can get the flowers should last at least 3 months, and I think it's possible to for them to last as long as a year. So when it comes to obviously what you do want, you plant the actual leaves to grow. So it's a good idea to feed the plants, and you can buy orchid fertilizer that you put on every week. Although if you do fertilize it, I would have some water in, say, every month without any fertilizer, so you can flush the substrate from any salts that are built up during that time. They do prefer rainwater, but they do seem to, as far as I can see, tolerate London's hard tap water. And between watering, you need to, the conditions, the environment it's in, and also the growing medium that has been provided dictates how often you water them. It might be daily or it might be weekly, depending on the humidity and temperature. But what you want to do is to fill the substrate or lift the pot up, and if it's dry, pretty much dried out, then water it again. It's a bit similar to cacti actually, because you don't want the roots to be sitting in water, so you want to remove the water. And probably the best way, although a bit time consuming, if you've got a pot, if it's in a pot inside a ceramic, best way is to fill up the ceramic with water with the pot in it, give it 5 or 10 minutes, and then drain all the water away. Elsewise, if you just water from the top, you must check the bottom to see whether there's any water left, because you need to throw that away. Otherwise, the roots at the bottom will just rot away. So how do you encourage it to flower? Well, you may be lucky, and it can extend the flowering further using the same flower spike. Do not cut off the flower spike unless it goes brown, because you can get branching and extra flowers. You can see this one has branched quite a number of times, and there's a new flower starting on that branch. So if I'd cut it off, the plant would have to create a whole new flower spike, which takes a lot of energy, and it only happens once a year typically. This, as you can see, this one is growing a new flower spike. You can tell it's a flower spike. It is possible to get it confused with the aerial roots, because they grow from more or less the same place. But you can tell the difference because it's pointy at the end, and also has nodes down its length. If you're thinking of trying to train it on a stick, you want to do it when it's still flexible, because at the moment you can see this new one is quite green and looks quite flexible. Once they get a bit further on, they'll go hard and you'll break it if you try and train it. Yeah, and this one, as you see, this probably might have started off looking like a new flower spike, but it's actually a aerial root. And if you haven't got any growth, on a new spike, on an old spike, it's not a problem, because sooner or later, if you grow the plant and feed it, and it likes the environment, a new one will grow. But it will only grow if it's got the right conditions. And you might notice that they're available in shops all the year round. That's because nurseries cheat really with the environment. And the trick is, I was wondering why none of my Phalaenopsis would flower again, because they were growing quite well. And then I realized found out what you have to do is to put them in an environment where the nighttime temperature is around about 5 degrees cooler than the normal room temperature. So I turned the central heating down at night, and immediately about three of these orchids just started pushing up new flower spikes. So you need to put them, also putting them, if you put them during the summer near the window where it naturally gets colder at night, that's good, but it shouldn't go below about 15 or so. And then that should push it into to flower, hopefully. And if when the flower you can trim the flower stalk because it's unlikely to flower where the old flowers are. And if you can look at this flower stalk, you can see kind of I think there's a tip, and then there's three nodes which have kind of oval scars on it, and that's where the flowers were, and they fell off. And if you look further to the right, you'll see there's a node which clearly hasn't had any flower, and that will contain a dormant eye, and that if you cut it off to a centimetre above there, then that may well stimulate it to start growing a new branch and it's usually a flower, but it can also be a new plantlet, which if you allow to grow, you can then cut off and pot up. And yeah, and that's about it. If the growing mediums, which is usually bark and pine bark these days, if it goes to mush, it will starve the roots of oxygen, and then you need to repot it. And it does, in my experience, it stays okay for at least a year or maybe several years, but it needs to keep it under observation. And you can buy new orchid bark, and it's quite easy to repot up. If you do it carefully, you don't really damage the roots, and you should take off any dead roots at that point. And that's about, I think that's about it. So I hope you found that useful. I could take questions if there's any. Is there time for that?
Yeah, I think we definitely have time if there's anyone who's joined us live that would like to ask a question. Thank you very much for that, David, by the way. That was excellent. Thanks so much. Nope, doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it. In that case, would you mind, actually, I will boot you out of screen sharing if you don't mind, David, just because we have a couple more questions, sort of BPCG QT questions that I will get on to. I have two questions from Joe Denson about planting beans. The first of which is it too early or too cold to be planting beans in London? It certainly doesn't seem too cold outside. I think we are in, so traditional wisdom would say, yes, maybe a little bit too early. I think in a lot of cases, you wouldn't consider planting beans outside until sort of early May, which obviously is right around the corner, or middle May. And so you could be 100% guaranteed that the last frost is completely, definitely 100% out of the way, because the frost will do a real number on them. It seems like those windows get wider and wider every year as climate change kind of makes itself more and more noticeable. We are in the middle of the warmest April for 350 years is the official count, although I always wonder how certain we are of the temperature records from 350 years ago. I feel like the warmest April ever is equally likely. And certainly seeing as we've had almost unbroken sunshine, it seems, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, just to really rub it in that most of us can't leave our houses. The soil temperature is certainly about as high as you could expect for this time of year. So the gambling man in me would say, yeah, you could probably plant them out now. You could probably chance it, but traditional wisdom would say no. Would anyone else on the panel like to rein in on that in terms of should you be planting beans outside, or is it too soon? Nope.
No, I don't think it's in London. But what I would say is as you pointed out, it's incredibly dry at the moment.
Yes.
You've got to be watering them 2 or 3 times a day, really, because they're only going to be, a couple of centimetres below the surface. And I would say, in London, definitely in London, it'd be okay. If you've got cloches or a couple of sheets of glass or plastic you can put over the top, that's fine, for a couple of days.
Right, and then the next question about beans again. How can you tell the difference between climbing beans and French beans? I ordered 2 lots of French beans, but one has a tag as a climbing bean. They actually look exactly the same to me. They look kind of the same to me, actually, Joe, as well. So I am not sure. Can anyone give any indication on how to tell the difference? Because I mean, presumably they are climbing French beans as opposed to dwarf French beans. So they do look pretty similar to your average climbing bean.
I don't think I could tell. I've never thought about that, actually. Just make sure you keep them labelled and know what's what, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they will become easier to identify as they mature. French beans tend to be significantly smaller, and you're looking for a more tender bean, because the idea with French beans is you just eat the whole thing in the pod, whereas most climbing beans, when they get pretty large, the pods can get a little bit too stringy and tough to be appetizing. So in several weeks' time, you may be able to, certainly once the beans start to develop, you should be able to tell the difference. But for the time being, you will just you will have to just you may just have to wait and see, I'm afraid, because I'm afraid none of us can give you any hints as to how to tell them apart. Okay, that is it for the questions that we've had supplied this week for BPCG. Oh, hold on. I'm just noticing that. Oh, I actually have a question from Rita, who is here with us in the chat. I'm Rita, who has never managed to get rid of vine weevil. I'm sick to death of them. Sorry to need to resort to chemicals. How long will a systemic killer last in the plants? I mean, this is of a special, you need to be especially careful with this, obviously, if you're growing something for crop, because you don't want to be consuming anything that you've just, when you flooded the plant with poison. It should, if you have a systemic weakener that specializes in cropping plants, it should give you some indication as to how long you have to wait before you can consume whatever it is you're growing. It's often not that long. There are some spray-on bug killers that you can consume the product within sort of I think it's after 72 hours. But the first thing I would say is to check the back of the poison to see if they give you any indication. I was about to ask the panel, but David has disappeared. So if anyone here is using kind of systemic killer, especially on vine weevils, if vine weevils have been an issue for you in the past, does anyone have any advice for Rita?
No.
Okay.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah, vine weevils are certainly pernicious.
Can I ask the question? What damage do they cause on a plant? I've never had any experience of them at all.
So vine weevils eat pretty much. They'll munch on almost anything, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's normally sort of ornamental plants and fruit that they tend to go for. I think that they look quite cute, the vine weevil, but the problem is that they're kind of a double pest, in that the larvae are a pest in the soil, and then the mature vine weevils, which look like sort of tiny little beetles, will nibble on the vegetative parts of the plant and obviously the fruit and the crop. I think containers are probably the thing. Oh, Rita, yes. Have you got some? I tell you what. Hold on, just for 1 moment, because you are currently on mute. I will take you off, and then hopefully you can give us some more context.
Okay.
Oh, right. Hello, Rita. Hi.
Hello. Was it Douglas who said that they eat the roots, Douglas? So your plant just dies from the root, and then it just dies.
Yeah.
And you know, they love choice acid-loving plants. They're particularly keen on heuchera or heuchera. Anything really ornamental, they will go for. Primulas especially. So I don't want primulas ever. But this winter, they have munched their way through God knows how much. So they've been really vicious this winter. They are very, very destructive because, you know, now, this time of year, they've sort of graduated and they're hermaphrodites, so they don't need to mate, and they just lay all these horrible eggs that turn into grubs. I don't know how Chris can find them attractive, but each to their own. Oh my God, they're so.
No, I mean, sorry, that was me. That it's the mature beetles that the mature weevils that I can think of quite.
Are you an entomologist then?
No, I just think they look. I mean, I appreciate that they're very frustrating as pests.
Rita, I'm not an expert in this at all, but I wonder whether there's a biological control for vine weevil.
I've tried that. You know, they're very expensive and a bit like the nematodes that the woman was saying, Kat was saying, well, it didn't work on the lettuce. Well, it didn't work on my garden either. So they are pernicious.
Obviously, you know, it's hard. We used nematodes on the kitchen garden last year very successfully. And it kept them down until about the end of May. And then over the summer, we didn't grow salad. But we think that they were successful. I don't know why it is different this year.
I think I'm incompetent.
Have we?
I'm sure it's not that, Rita. I think
I'm not very technical or scientific, so I'm a bit of a Dumbo.
I'm not very technical or scientific either. But you know, the principle is that you find a bigger insect that eats the smaller insect that's eating your plant, and then you release it in your garden.
In an ideal world,
I think Ursula had something to say.
Yes.
I was just going to say about the nematodes that I have used them on pots quite successfully, but obviously you knew about them then. Then you mentioned them, so
I've spent a lot of money. I've spent a lot of money on the nematodes.
Right.
So it's a bit of a sore topic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one thing that you will
find... What you do is at the right time.
Sorry. Solution.
One thing that I would say about the nematodes and the reason I suspect that they have been not quite so successful at BPCG this year is that it is just unseasonably warm and dry. Most species, because biological nematodes, because, you know, in most cases you're looking for one very specific species that feeds on, you know, either the larva or the adult form of one particular form of pest, they tend to go through their entire life cycle in a relatively short period of time, because obviously they're matching, you know, the stage of these insects' lives, and they don't live very particularly long either. That means that they do need very, very consistent conditions. Obviously, that is much easier to maintain in a container or in a pot than it is in a big outside bed. But I think that with the salad beds at BPCG, it's probably just been too warm. We have, you know, we just haven't been able to keep it moist enough, because it only really takes, you know, the plants will obviously can survive a little period of drought, but I think in some cases the nematodes, the population just won't survive if the conditions aren't correct for them for an extended period, and that just means they just don't have the time to do the job.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So I'm not disagreeing at all, Rita, that they can sometimes be expensive and maybe a little bit underwhelming. But as a solution, you do have to really, really focus on the conditions and make sure that they are. I'm trying to think of. The only thing that I've learned about vine weevils is there's plenty of stuff that eats the adult bugs, but I can't think of anything apart from the biological nematodes that would prey on the larvae, unless you can find a hedgehog to dunk face down in your containers.
Do you know, can I ask another question?
Please do.
Has anyone had any frogs or tadpoles this season?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
How dare you? I haven't.
We've had tadpoles in the pond.
Yeah.
At the garden, we've had tadpoles, and you can still see them. They're getting quite big now.
I'm sad.
So
My
I mean,
garden seems to be becoming a desert.
Frogs would be. I think frogs would prove to be a vine weevil predator. So hopefully next year.
I'd rather buy the frogs than the nematodes.
Fair enough. Right. Well, I feel we haven't really delivered for you, Rita, on that one, but we've tried our best.
Thank you.
No problem.
You.
Right, we've got about 5 minutes to go. I'm just going to do a few quick plugs, especially seeing as this video is going to go up on YouTube and on the BPCG website as well. I literally just finished editing together the videos that Kate took last night for us. So I haven't had a chance to upload that to the BPCG website again. If you would like to watch that again, probably with a little bit better sound than is available to screen sharing on Zoom, I will upload that once this session is over. There's some really excellent videos with Kat in the greenhouse as well, guiding us through some of the stuff that's growing there now and explaining what we're going to be doing with all that stuff in the upcoming weeks. Because they are already, I don't have them downloaded to my machine. I'm not going to display them now just because the quality is not going to be great. But they're right there on the first page of the BPCG website. And I should also say that, as with every week, there are plenty of online sessions. There's still stuff kind of going on, especially online for BPCG, for people to attend, for people to learn from. And we still have plenty of products as well for sale online. I'm not going to plug anything particular too heavily, just because I know that stuff, you know, we say online that that we've got stuff for sale and then we have a big rush on it. But you can buy those products online and then you can collect them from BPCG while still practicing social distancing, or we will email you to say, here's your kind of pickup slot and you can come pick them up without having to get within 2 meters of anybody. I've just noticed, oh, Rita, I've got one more question from you. This is great. Let's do this and then we will draw the session to a close. Does anyone know a fab climber? A wild one?
Can I, sorry, Josh, can I just add to what you just said, that if members of our community who are at home self-isolating because they are in a at-risk category, I can see, I think, 3 here, I'm happy to drive around with honey or whatever if you want to buy it online. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's close with, panel, your wild climber recommendations, please.
Oh, no. Chris, it's a wild climber. It's a wild climber that bees go crazy. It's an aphrodisiac for bees. When it flowers, it's a twining thing. I thought it was rubbish. It was a weed. And then, lo and behold, when it flowered, the bees went mad, and it has a lovely scent. Tiny little flowers. They're sort of whitish, creamy. Nothing ostentatious or ornamental, but just the bees go mad.
Lovely.
A lovely scent.
Perhaps you could take a photo and bring it along next week, and we'll have a look and see if we can find out what it is.
So, what you mean? You want to see a photo of the leaves? It's
well,
still
the flowers would be.
Is it in flower now?
No.
No.
Late
When
summer.
Does it flower?
Later in the summer, but it's
Is
glaucous.
it a jasmine?
No. Oh no. It looks like a weed.
It looks like a weed. Okay.
But it's a little climby, twirly.
Yeah. Well, so a photo of the plant itself,
Okay.
so I can see the climbing, the nature of its climbing. Yeah.
It's got a big sort of tuberous root. Right. It's got it forms a tuberous big root.
Right. So it's not a shrub then? It's a herbaceous plant.
I honestly thought it was a weed and would have rooted it out. But luckily it survived and flowered, and it's a magnet. A magnet.
Great. I mean, obviously we love all those plants that attract the bees. I don't know if any of you have seen the photos of the besonarias, which are going rampant in the hot border at the moment, but they are also a magnet for the bees.
Are they from New Zealand? South Africa?
The besonaria.
What are they?
They're in the agave family, and they are South Americas, south of the Americas. But they produce a flower spike that's about 7 or 8 foot tall. And it's a magnet for bees.
Lovely.
Okay, thank you very much, Rita. As an excellent cliffhanger for next week. Either would you mind returning, perhaps with some photographs, so we can help you identify the plant, or try to anyway.
Thank you.
Or if you can't make the next slot, please do send us the photographs anyway. And for all the people that are watching this at home and dying to know what that plant is, because I'm certainly very curious now. Hopefully we can answer that next week.
It's a star, Chris. I've forgotten your name.
Joshua, hi.
Joshua. Sorry, Joshua. It's pre-senile time.
Right, I'm Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. We're all there. Okay. In that case, let's draw this session to a close. Just with one final reminder for everyone that's watching this non-live, that this is a space to come and kind of be with other volunteers, to just kind of present yourself. You don't need to have a question. You don't have to have a question that you find that you need asking. You don't have anything to present or anything like that. We are a Brockwell Park community greenhouses, and this is one of the best ways we found to kind of maintain that community while we're all stuck indoors. With that said, the sun is out again, third week for BPCG Q.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.
And, yeah, enjoy the sunshine, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Thank
all.
you.
Bye everyone.
Yeah, goodbye.